Can you understand a memorandum of understanding when there's no understanding of what's been agreed to in the memorandum of understanding? That is where we are with the war with Iran. We try to untangle things. If you are an American with a suspected case of Ebola in Africa, the Trump administration says you cannot come home for treatment. Patients will go instead to a pop-up facility in Kenya because it's quick. But is it the best? A ton of AI news this week. Pope Leo's encyclical, mounting political opposition to data centers, proposals to tax AI giants, college grads booing commencement speakers who even mention AI. We will tackle all of this with The Atlantic's Nick Thompson. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to the Takeout. The biggest story today is not, I repeat, not, whether President Trump's face will appear on a $250 bill that no one appears to be clamoring for. But as we say in the biz, it's a good talker. So let's talk for a second. The Treasury Department has designed the bill at Trump's behest. His picture, his signature. That's just preparatory work. Congress first will have to change the law that prohibits the image of any living American from appearing on U.S. currency. Speaking of currencies, Trump is running a bit low with Republicans in Congress. With last week's rebellion against the anti-weaponization fund, persistent questions about the ballooning cost of the White House ballroom. Oh, yes, and there's that uneasiness about inflation and Trump's clear-cutting of disfavored Republicans in recent primaries. Lots of hard feelings. The GOP overall then may well regard a Trump-faced $250 bill as lacking political currency. They might even view it as a symbol of ego inflation when, as we all know, there's plenty enough inflation to go around. Speaking of currency, Trump appears on the verge of trading the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz for not very much. The White House confirmed the general outlines of an agreement. That's the memorandum of understanding we keep hearing about, but hastened to add, Trump has not yet signed off on it. But if this thing goes forward, the memorandum would extend the existing ceasefire, which has its own kinetic infirmities. I mean, both sides keep shooting at each other. And put off for a future date negotiations on ending, and by what means, Iran's nuclear program. Iran, if this goes forward, might even obtain some sanctions relief. For what it's worth, the Iranians deny an agreement has been reached. This may be a breakthrough or more muddle. So, Iran would get money from oil sales via a reopened strait, possible sanctions relief, or unfreezing of assets, and Trump would get an Iranian promise not to pursue nuclear weapons, details to come later, and a reopened strait, which we should remind ourselves was open when this war began. At today's White House briefing, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was asked over and over if a deal was done. He could not say, and we pick it up there with our colleague Nancy Cordes at the White House. Nancy, take it away.
Major, it was clear that the Secretary of the Treasury, as he said multiple times, did not want to get out ahead of the president. In other words, no one knows exactly what President Trump is going to do and whether he is going to sign off on this draft agreement. But White House officials did confirm that it exists, did confirm that he's taking a look at it, and he's deciding, and there are indications that Iranian leaders are deciding as well. What the Treasury Secretary told me today is that any language in this draft agreement about either waiving sanctions on Iran or unfreezing some of their assets would be phased in over time if Iran reached certain milestones. So, for example, if the Strait of Hormuz was reopened as laid out in the MOU by the Iranians, then perhaps some of the sanctions on them would be waived. But beyond that, he didn't want to go into a whole lot of detail because, as we have seen, the president has kind of gone back and forth on whether he even thinks that this is a good deal, whether it's a great deal, and whether he'd even be willing to sign something if it wasn't a great deal. And so no one wants to really, to put pen to paper and say, here's exactly what's in an agreement if the agreement isn't going to be approved by the president at the end of the day.
The Treasury Secretary also made some news about Oman. He said he talked to a significant official within the Omani government today about something the president said yesterday at the cabinet meeting, which was, if Oman doesn't behave, words to this effect, we're going to have to bomb them. What did the Treasury Secretary say about that conversation?
Right. He said that the president is simply making it clear that the Strait of Hormuz needs to be open with the free entry and exit of commercial vessels going forward, and that no one will control it. And he said that the Omanis understand that the president wasn't actually threatening to bomb them, that it was some hyperbole. But certainly it was concerning to the Omanis. We know that from our reporting at CBS News, that this longtime ally of the United States, its leaders were pretty concerned yesterday when the president was asked about this Iranian report claiming that that going forward after this war, Oman and Iran would basically share control of the strait and impose, if not tolls, then some kind of fee for ships to go in and out. This was something that was coming from the Iranians. President Trump was asked about it at his cabinet meeting yesterday, and that's when he said, Oman wouldn't do that because they know that I bombed them. And it now appears that White House officials are looking to walk that threat back.
Hyperbole. That's how you say it. Nancy Cordes, thank you. I'll remember that next time. Here with me now, CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata and CBS News national security analyst and host of the School of War podcast, Aaron McClain. Charlie, I mentioned in my own cheeky way the ceasefire having kinetic infirmities. That means people keep shooting at each other. We have some reports still trying to be confirmed of something that's happened just in the last couple of hours.
Right. Kinetic infirmities is a great way to describe it, because we have seen an escalation in the past 24 hours. And just moments before I arrived in a rush, I was on to Central Command. That's the military organization in charge of that region in the Middle East. There are reports of explosions. They could be firing warning shots along the strait, because this is a tense situation that they've been in. Also a report that Iran may have launched a ballistic missile. Where this is important is in the past 24 hours, CENTCOM officials that I spoke to say there have been multiple attacks. So there have been drone attacks, 5 that were launched and intercepted. They also hit one before it was launched, so that makes 6. Drones are one thing. A ballistic missile is another. So they sent a ballistic missile into Kuwait. It was Kuwaiti forces that intercepted that. So this is next level. This is where CENTCOM is saying, well, wait a minute, this is a clear breach of our ceasefire. There have been tit for tat. The United States, as you know, last weekend fired on parts of the Strait of Hormuz and around the Strait of Hormuz. These were called self-defense maneuvers to defend U.S. forces in the region. But we have seen a clear escalation, and we'll have to get more details about exactly what's unfolding now.
And Aaron, this is clearly a situation where the United States could be provoked, but is trying not to be provoked, because it's not obviously a ceasefire. When firing is going on, firing hasn't ceased, but they're trying to hold this place open to see if negotiations can gain a foothold.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the president clearly does not want to return to full-scale military action. He threatens to on a pretty regular basis, but his actions since
Because
April
if the U.S. wanted to be provoked, there'd be plenty, to Charlie's word, a ballistic missile is provocative enough.
Absolutely. Firing a ballistic missile at Kuwait is a pretty clear violation. They fired a bunch of missiles and drones at the UAE 2 weeks ago now during the Project Freedom 36-hour period. So there are plenty of pretexts, if that's what you're looking for, to restart military action. But restarting military action would lead to Iranian escalation, strikes across the region, more conflict, energy prices going higher. The president doesn't want to do that.
Right. Charlie, what do we know about the composition of U.S. forces? Do they remain as robust as they were in late February when all of this began?
Yeah, very much so. So the centerpiece of the strike group that's out there now is the Abe Lincoln Strike Group. With it, maybe a dozen or so guided missile destroyers. There are dozens of squadrons of attack fighters, F-35s, F-18 fighter jets that are part of that. So their missile launch capacity and their aerial capacity to launch airstrikes is there. And not only there, Major, less than a week ago, we were all on standby to go to a special report because it looked like it was about to start up again. And I spoke to military officials there. Of course, they're not going to show their cards. There's obviously operational security issues involved there. But they were on a knife edge through Memorial Day weekend. So right up until a couple of days ago, they're ready to launch. And I said, 24 hours? They said, no, now, like right now, as soon as that goes. And it could, because when we have seen a return to military activity has sometimes been during talks with Iran. Right. That's what we've seen in the past. So, there's precedence there as well.
Aaron, what does this look like to you right now?
Disorientation. I'm tempted to write an absurdist play in the spirit of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. I'm going to call it Waiting for the Deal, because it feels like every single day we're told there's some leak to the press that the deal is imminent. Today, the news was that the text had actually been agreed between the United States and Iran. The Iranians, by the way, there's Iranian state media denying that. There's a bit of confusion about it, but that's what came from the White House today.
Is some of that being driven by diplomats in the region who are hopeful that this can get resolved?
Or personnel in the White House who are hopeful that it can get resolved diplomatically.
You're detecting that as well.
Absolutely, even though the president has not yet signed off. One of the reasons why he probably hasn't signed off is that when we finally get a look at what the details of this document involves, I have a feeling that there are going to be a number of Republican politicians, Iran hawks, who are going to be very unhappy with what's in it, and the president has to contemplate how much pain he's willing to put up with on Capitol Hill, amongst other places, if he agrees to this.
Charlie, real quick. A couple of 3 weeks ago, there was this conversation about interceptors and our ability to intercept, either help our allies in the region or do it ourselves. Any visibility on that?
That has been an issue. We have learned since that the United States had supported Israel in the defense of Israel with a lot of its interceptors. We kind of knew that on the ground. I was there at the time when that war was unfolding. And I spoke to Israelis who shared with us that, yes, in addition to that Arrow 3, which is kind of comparable to what the United States military can provide in terms of the larger missiles coming in, yes. I put that question to a few officials, some on the record, some off the record, who said this isn't an issue for here now yet in this particular conflict. And they've taken the opportunity for this ceasefire to reposition, rearm, put munitions where they need to be. Now, further ahead, has that taken resources? It takes a long time to rebuild these things, and they fired a lot of them, not only in protection of U.S. forces, but in protection of Israel, too. So they are far from saying anything about being exhausted at this point, but it is going to become critical mass.
It's a numbers game down the road, for sure.
Absolutely.
Charlie Daggett, Aaron McLean, always great stuff. Thank you so very much. Turning now to Ebola in Africa. The Trump administration confirms it is working to set up a quarantine facility in Kenya. White House officials told reporters today it will be open tomorrow. It will be open only for Americans who were exposed to or infected with the deadly illness. At least 223 people are believed to have died from Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That number, of course, is expected to grow. I want to bring in CBS News medical correspondent Dr. Celine Gounder. As you know, and we discuss this every time, she's an infectious disease specialist who spent time in Guinea as an Ebola aid worker during the West African pandemic. Dr. Gounder, help my audience understand what you make of and what those in this space perceive about either the benefits or the risks of putting a facility in Kenya and not bringing any American who's suspected of being infected home for treatment here.
So this facility in Kenya will have treatment, monoclonal antibodies, which may or may not work against this variant, this species of Ebola, antivirals, respiratory support. But medevac planes can actually deliver all of that in the air. What the planes cannot do, so dialysis, mechanical ventilation, heart-lung bypass machines, the quarantine unit in Kenya will not be able to do either. On the other hand, American biocontainment units at places like Emory, Nebraska, Bellevue, and other facilities across the country, they can provide that higher level of care. So the administration is essentially sending Americans who get infected with Ebola to a middle tier of care when they could go straight to the best back home. And they're also saying that if Americans need a higher level of care, they will be sent to facilities in Europe. They haven't yet identified what those facilities would be. And the plan is already facing resistance on the ground, not just from aid workers and specialists like myself who are concerned that this will discourage people from going over to assist, but also on the ground, Kenya's doctors union is threatening a nationwide strike, and you have a legal challenge that has been filed in Kenya's highest court.
And the Kenyan concern is this facility, if it's there, should be available, I'm gathering, to everyone, not just Americans. I think that's point one. Point two, is there a history ever, Dr. Gounder, of a situation where the American government said an American cannot come home for treatment
Well,
of any kind of disease?
yeah, so this is there are questions about the constitutionality of this. So part of your liberties as an American citizen is freedom of travel, and this might possibly violate the Fifth Amendment. So there are real concerns about, it may not be a ban on paper, but if the U.S. government is the only way you can get back, and they are not providing you with the way to get back, in essence, it is a ban from travel back to the U.S.
Talk to the audience, my audience, Dr. Gounder, about screening at airports. Where is it happening? What does it mean? And what kind of protection does it provide?
So there are 4 airports now. So Dulles, Atlanta, JFK, and Houston. With Ebola, the incubation period is up to 21 days. So somebody could pass through the airport, be incubating the infection, pass a temperature screen, and develop symptoms a week or even longer later. So screening will only catch the rare traveler who already has symptoms, many of whom just wouldn't want to fly because they feel so sick. It misses everybody in the incubation window. So it's one layer, but it's not going to stop an epidemic. And in fact, we tried to do this with COVID. We screened hundreds of thousands of passengers, only picked up 9 that had COVID. So what these kinds of restrictions on travel do is they make it harder for people to go in and respond to this kind of outbreak. What really stops an epidemic like this is the basics: your surveillance, your contact tracing, testing, and then treatment and isolation if you pick up a case of Ebola. And unfortunately, the infrastructure that USAID and PEPFAR built over decades to do exactly that kind of work, that infrastructure was dismantled last summer.
Very quickly, Dr. Gounder, when the White House talked to reporters today, it said the Kenyan facility is beneficial because it's quick. Anyone suspected of having Ebola can get there, and that's better than putting them on a plane and allowing things to happen that otherwise won't if you're there more rapidly dealt with. Is there any validity to that?
Well, you're basically let's say they decompensate, they get worse, and the option is sending them to Europe versus the U.S. That's a difference of 5 or 6 hours. So it's not a huge difference. And again, the planes can deliver the same level of care as this facility in Kenya would be able to deliver. In fact, may even be better. And so there's really no reason from a travel perspective, a transit time perspective, not to put them immediately on the plane and send them to where we have the best care in the world for this.
Dr. Celine Gounder, thank you very much, as always. In an interview that will air Sunday on the marquee program CBS Sunday Morning, former First Lady Jill Biden said she was frightened watching then-President Biden debate Donald Trump, fearing he was having a stroke. Sunday Morning has released a new exchange with our colleague Rita Braver, where the First Lady, Joe Biden, defends her husband's overall mental state during his presidency.
Did you ever see signs that he was falling into cognitive decline?
No,
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 truly.
no.
I mean, people were saying he wasn't the same Joe Biden.
Well, I don't think that's true. He was the essence of the same Joe Biden, but yeah, he was slowing down. He was getting older. I mean, we all observed that. When it's a very intense job. I think it ages you quickly.
Contributing writer for Vanity Fair and New York Times best-selling author Chris Whipple, also a friend of this program, joins me now. He is the author of Uncharted: How Trump Beat Biden, Harris, and the Odds in the Wildest Campaign in History. Chris, assess what we have heard in these clips from the former First Lady based on your reporting in the moment and what she is quite obviously, even in public, still struggling with.
Yeah, Major, good to see you. There's a conventional wisdom that is hardened into almost an article of faith that Joe Biden was Woodrow Wilson, that he was non compos mentis, helpless, sitting in a corner while a cabal of aides was running the country by autopen. And frankly, it's nonsense. I mean, it's much more complicated and nuanced than that. And so I have real sympathy for Jill Biden here. And I think the tragedy of the Biden presidency was his inability to realize, face up to the fact that he was too old to run for re-election or govern effectively in a second term. But there really is no compelling evidence that Joe Biden was not functioning well behind closed doors. I mean, literally on the day of his abdication, when he put out that statement from Rehoboth Beach, he was on the phone negotiating a complex multi-nation prisoner swap. So again, I think that this first draft of history, and I like Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, I think they're great reporters, but I think they got it wrong here. I think that Biden, there's no really compelling evidence that he wasn't doing okay behind closed doors.
So the question in your mind, Chris, was not could you carry out, if you're Joe Biden, the remainder of your term? Should you have told the country you would be capable for a second term?
Yeah, there's just no question about it. It was a tragic mistake on Biden's part. It will stain his legacy, his inability to face the fact that it was just not believable that he could serve effectively for another term when he would have been, what, 86? That just wasn't going to fly. Jill Biden is complicit in that decision, in that failure to face that reality. But what I'm saying here, and what I think is fascinating for historians, you know, Jill Biden said she thought he was having a stroke during that debate. I thought he was having a stroke during that debate. There's no evidence that he really had episodes like that at any other point. And so this remains a mystery. What happened during that debate when we all saw him unable to carry a thought and in real trouble? But the mystery remains: why did nobody see that before or after?
Quick reminder to our audience: here's what the debate looked like, and here's the clip from Joe Biden that we played yesterday.
I've changed it in a way that now you're in a situation where there are 40% fewer people coming across the border illegally. It's better than when he left office. And I'm going to continue to move until we get the total ban on the total initiative relative to what we're going to do with more Border Patrol and more asylum officers.
President Trump?
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Were you horrified as you saw it unfold?
I wasn't horrified, I was frightened, because I had never, ever seen Joe like that before or since. Never.
Or since?
Yes, or
You've
since.
never seen him like
never.
that?
No.
What happened?
I don't know what happened. I mean, as I watched it, I thought, oh my God, he's having a stroke. And it scared me to death.
Chris, very quickly, you said you're sympathetic to Dr. Joe Biden. Is that sympathy in any way leavened by her complicity in telling the country, as Joe Biden did, he was fully capable of campaigning for and carrying out a second term?
Yeah, there's no question about it, Major. I mean, she's complicit in that decision, which was tragic for the Democratic Party, arguably for the country. Joe Biden should have realized, with her help, that it was time to step aside. It's also hard to explain Jill Biden's behavior after the debate, literally that evening, when she said words to the effect of, "Joe, you did a great job. You answered every question," when he clearly had not. And she was afraid that he was suffering from a stroke.
Indeed. Chris Whipple, great stuff as always. I appreciate it, sir. Thank you.
Great.
Still to come on the Takeout, the Justice Department has launched a criminal investigation into Trump accuser E. Jean Carroll. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson weighs in on what that means and what may lie ahead. Also, a new warning from Pope Leo on artificial intelligence, a look at the pontiff's concerns for all of humanity. Plus, a new poll on California's race for governor finds two candidates pulling away, one Republican, one Democrat. The Democrats a little bit farther ahead. Our reporter panel will weigh in on that and much more. The Takeout comes back to you in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. Sources tell CBS News the Justice Department has opened a criminal investigation into a nonprofit that funded part of E. Jean Carroll's civil litigation against President Donald Trump. Carroll won 2 lawsuits against Trump, accusing him of sexual assault and defamation. She says he attacked her in a department store dressing room in the mid-1990s. Trump has denied the allegations, but both judgments were upheld on federal appeal. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins me now. So let's start with the fact that these judgments were upheld. So what would the basis of revisiting this particular part of a potential perjury allegation against E. Jean Carroll be relevant to?
Oh, I love this question because the answer is that it would not unwind the verdicts that we see. So what we're looking at here apparently are investigations into potential perjury by E. Jean Carroll, and we can talk about why I think that's a weak case, and then also into the nonprofit that helped to defray the costs of this case. But I think what's important for people to know, and your question tees this up perfectly, is that even if there was perjury, even if there was an issue with the funding by the nonprofit, that doesn't undermine the substance of the claims that E. Jean Carroll brought, and it doesn't unwind the jury's verdict in this case. I think when it comes to the questions that the Trump administration asked about the source of funding, what they were trying to get at is E. Jean Carroll's credibility and why are you really bringing this case? But the jury found that, in fact, there was a there, and that these claims were meritorious, and any potential perjury charge in an investigation to the nonprofit, I see as separate and apart from those jury verdicts.
Why is it a weak case about possible perjury?
So I think it's a weak case for a couple of reasons. The idea is that the case is based on a 2022 deposition in which E. Jean Carroll said that she did not think that there was or there wasn't outside funding for her case. Later, she and her attorney corrected the record and said, in fact, that there was outside funding. They flagged that correction for the trial court judge. The trial court judge found that, in fact, she was credible in correcting the record. And I believe in the case said that President Trump's attorneys should not ask about that particular issue because, again, the judge found there wasn't an issue with her credibility. This issue, in part, went up to the Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit. The Second Circuit looked at this and similarly found that E. Jean Carroll had credibly said, I just forgot in 2022, and that she corrected the record and that this, in fact, did not undermine her credibility in bringing those claims. The other thing I would add, so again, you have 2 sets of judges, the district court judge and then the Court of Appeals judges looking at this issue. I'd also add it's extremely unusual to have the Department of Justice look into alleged perjury based on a deposition in a case between 2 private parties.
Jessica Levinson, always great stuff. Thank you very much. Artificial intelligence is causing controversy, that's putting it mildly, at some graduation ceremonies, as new questions swirl about the cost, the job implications, and the rest. We'll have more on that when we come back. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. Pope Leo has released his first encyclical of his papacy, and it focuses on humanity and, in part, warned about the risks to humanity of artificial intelligence. Nick Thompson joins me now. He is the CEO of The Atlantic, someone I've talked to frequently about technology and the technology space. Nick, it's always great to have you here. Get to the Pope's encyclical in a minute, but I want to play for you something that happened at 2 different commencement ceremonies. First speaker you hear is Gloria Caulfield. The second is Scott Borchetta. But what links them is the audience meeting the student graduates' reaction. Play it.
Artificial intelligence is the next industrial revolution. What happened?
AI is rewriting production as we sit here. I know it. Deal with it. Like I said, it's a tool.
Evaluate that.
Young people don't like AI. It's actually been really interesting, and you can see it coming in the polls. And they're worried, A, about their future, They're worried it's going to cause a lot of disruption. They're seeing how it changed their education. They may have used it to write their homework, but they're really concerned about what it's going to do. And they don't like the environmental costs. They care more about the environment than people who are older. AI is widely unpopular. I think it's amazing, but it is widely unpopular, particularly among young people.
Because it typically is old people like me who are resistant to technology and young people who see it as cool and innovative and futuristic.
Yeah,
this is interesting then.
It's profoundly interesting. It's the first technology that I've ever seen in my life. And you can see it in demographic data. 40-year-olds like it more than 20-year-olds. And that's why those graduation speakers were kind of, the first one was like, wait, what's going on here? Like, why'd you boo? But if I give a talk on AI and I'm talking to a college, they respond very differently than if I'm talking to older people at a business.
I want to get to the encyclical. I want to read a couple of things from it. I'm not the Pope and I can't quote him directly in his voice, but I will because it's a very interesting
Oh, it's great. I loved it. I loved it.
First one, control room. The pervasive technocratic paradigm in which we are immersed, and that is amplified by the digital revolution and AI, threatens to normalize an anti-human vision. In that vision, the fullness of life is equated with having more, reducing weakness, eliminating uncertainty, and exerting total control. Graphic 2. Thus, intelligence, when absolutized, overshadows other essential dimensions of life, such as affection, the will, commitment, and relationships. Similarly, technical power, if left unbalanced, does not make us more capable. It makes us more isolated and more vulnerable to being dominated and excluded.
Yeah, he has a very sophisticated analysis. He does at points point about the promises of AI. It wasn't all doom and gloom, which I think is important because there are a lot of wonderful things. But he's very concerned, it seems, from that quote, with three different and interesting, important things. One is the power consolidation. It is a very small number of companies and a very small number of people that are about to have a ton of power over how the world is shaped. And then secondly, we are offloading a lot of our thinking and a lot of what makes us human. He was very particularly concerned about people like falling in love with bots. And then there's this blurring of lines. What is a human? What is a person? And the Pope is very right to call these out. These are legitimately the most important concerns about AI.
Two real quick topics. Elizabeth Warren, Democratic Senator from Massachusetts, said we should tax in a specific way AI giants. And two, the rising political grassroots opposition to data centers.
So taxing, I do think it's very important that people feel like they have a stake in it. In fact, Dario Amodei of Anthropic has suggested that very idea. The counter argument is, wait a second, why should there be a particular tax? Where exactly you're going to tax downstream on the AI companies, not the people who use it? Should there be a tax on tokens? Like, there are a lot of implementation questions, but a challenge for the government, make sure there's buy-in. Because you don't have buy-in, you got a lot of angry young people, you're going to have a really, really
Which
big
leads
problem.
us to this data center opposition.
So people are angry at data centers because A, they're angry at AI, and B, they cause a lot of pollution and a lot of disruption. My view, AI will generally, I hope, be positive for the economy, right? And you can see some signs of it right now, and the use of AI right now can have a lot of benefits for business. I don't know how it's going to shake out. Data centers are at the bottom of that. I think if the country wants to grow, we need to have data centers. So that one, I'm kind of on the side of the data centers. So I'm like sometimes at the side of the critics and sometimes at the side of the capitalists in this conversation, Major.
That's why I want to have you here regularly. We will keep you here coming back. Nick Thompson, I appreciate it very much.
Thanks,
coming
Major.
up, California governor's race. No, not a governor's. Hold on. California Governor Gavin Newsom has endorsed in the mayor's race in Los Angeles, endorsing Karen Bass for re-election. Our reporter panel will talk about that and a lot more when we come back. Welcome back, reporter panel time. Let me introduce Tia Mitchell, Washington Bureau Chief, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Dave Leventhal, Senior Editor. I notice, renamed next week, The Star. We will pay very close attention to that. All right, I did this before we went to break, iron rule. If I went to it a break, I talk about it. So today, California Governor Gavin Newsom got off the sidelines and endorsed Karen Bass for re-election as mayor of Los Angeles. Why does this matter? Look at the polls. Bring it up, the control room, the full screen. Karen Bass at 26%. City Council member Nithya Raman, 25%. Spencer Pratt, reality TV star, 22%. Both Pratt and Raman have risen in the last month and a half. Karen Bass, flat. And the number one issue in this poll, according to LA voters, corruption and fraud in the mayor's office. That is a very bad thing if you're running for re-election. Tia.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of Democrats that are worried about the choices. And I think Karen Bass is the safe choice for the establishment, But she's being weighed down by being the incumbent. You know, she has a record for people to pick apart. But I think it shows that party leaders are trying to coalesce around her. But you're right, the undecideds are not going with Karen Bass. They're picking the other two leading candidates.
Dave, any real quick thoughts?
Fire is an issue. And this is something that has dogged her ever since that happened.
Yep.
And about two-thirds...
Being out of the country and then a slow response thereafter.
100%. And about two-thirds of voters in the city say the city's going in the wrong direction.
Quick update on the California governor's race. Also a new poll on that showing Javier Becerra 23%, Steve Hilton 20%, Tom Steyer following at 15% after spending more than $110 million on ads. Seems like the more he spends, the farther he falls. That's an interesting collection of data in politics. Dave, quick thoughts there.
I mean, one of the most underappreciated facts in politics is that the vast majority of self-funded candidates, particularly the ones at the highest level, don't win election. They lose. And Tom Steyer may be going in that very direction, as he saw in 2020 when he ran for president, also spent a fortune and didn't even get a single delegate vote.
Tia, I'm always fascinated to have you at the table to talk about what's going on in Georgia, because it is a huge year in Georgia. Governor's race, Senate race. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, speaking of self-funded candidates, we have healthcare executive billionaire Rick Jackson, whose spending has appeared to pay off because he went from nowhere to in a runoff, which
to qualifying for the runoff.
And he has not yet been leading in polls, but we haven't got to runoff polls yet. But there is a chance he could win. In Georgia, the person who enters the runoff in second place often wins the runoff. So on the Senate race, we've got Mike Collins versus
Derek Dooley.
Derek Dooley, the former football coach. And Mike Collins has just had some drama recently. He fired a top aide, some problematic tweets. So Derek Dooley fans are hoping that could help propel him.
He is backed by the governor, Brian Kemp. Derek Dooley
backed by Brian Kemp, but who hasn't weighed in yet is President Donald Trump. And people are Collins's team is hoping he gets a Trump endorsement despite some of the bad headlines.
What would a Trump endorsement mean for that runoff?
It'll mean everything because this is still a Republican
But would it jeopardize
primary.
it in the general?
Yes. I mean, that's why Governor Kemp is backing Derek Dooley. He thinks that Mike Collins is
probably going to get that endorsement, but probably can't carry it across the finish line.
Because remember, they're up against John Ossoff, the Democrat. He's an incumbent. He's very popular in the state. He's going to be hard to beat no matter who it is, but they think a MAGA Trump Republican would not be a great candidate against Ossoff.
Dave, I want to talk about some very interesting reporting you had about the top lawyer at the Department of Health and Human Services doing something that raised lots of eyebrows. What was it?
He's trading stocks in Corning, the glassmaker company. And why would we care about Corning, the glassmaker company? Well, because it has massive 9-figure contracts with the Department of Health and Human Services. I spoke to this lawyer, and he basically said, hey, I'm not doing anything wrong. I work my career ethically. The Office of Government Ethics, they took a bit of a different stance, and they actually declined to certify his disclosure of this stock trade. There's no huge strings attached there, but it's like a scarlet ethics letter, so some controversy.
A scarlet ethics letter, probably not the last we will see in the current iteration of government in Washington. Tia Mitchell, Dave Leventhal, thank you so much. Coming up, my conversation with the author of a new biography about the often misunderstood Mary Todd Lincoln. That's next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. A common perception, fed by a fair amount of scholarship, is that Mary Todd Lincoln was simply the grieving widow of Abraham Lincoln. A new biography titled An Inconvenient Widow by veteran journalist Lois Romano looks at the crucial influence she had in her husband's rise to the presidency and the failures of those around her following President Lincoln's assassination. Here is some of our conversation. Lois, I'm going to start with the subtitle, not the title. The Torment, Trial, and Triumph of, here's the title, An Inconvenient Widow. There's a lot in there.
There is a lot in there.
There's a lot of emotion. That's the leading characteristic of the life of Mary Todd Lincoln, is it not?
It's all volatile and emotional. You're absolutely right.
Why?
Well, she was an emotional, volatile woman. And the reason I wanted to do the book is that I didn't think there was a well-rounded portrait of her out there. When I started to do the book, I knew I was right because people would come up to me and say, wasn't she crazy? And yeah, she had some mental illness, but so did her husband. But when we see her through history's eyes, it's very one-dimensional. We see all the negative things about her, and not the positive things.
Let's cut to the chase.
Yes.
This is masculine judgment, is it not?
It is totally masculine judgment. And you can see patterns when you read all the scholarship from over the years. It was the men, it was the male, even early on, his friends who didn't like her. And I think there was a couple of things going on there. I think she did have an irascible personality, but I think there was some jealousy because she had his ear. And I think that a lot of his advisors didn't like that. And she was too close and she got in the way. And she did things that women didn't do. Like when he was elected to Congress, she said, well, I'm going to come to Washington with you with the toddlers. And that just wasn't done. And David Davis, his good friend, wrote it to his wife and said she wishes to loom large in Washington, which of course she didn't because he was a freshman congressman. She loomed very small
right.
and then left.
Right.
But she was just in their way a little bit.
Do you get the feeling that had she been a man with the same characteristics, she would have been labeled eccentric instead of crazy?
Yes. She would have been labeled strong and outspoken.
Right.
Right. I mean, she was a little eccentric. But, you know.
But eccentric is more neutral.
It's more neutral, right.
Way more neutral.
Right.
And when people walk up to you and say their only impression of her is that she's crazy, that's sunk in.
I had an aha moment late in the process where, you know, I talked to a lot of shrinks about all of this and I read all the reports. And somebody, a local person here, I just had her read some stuff, and she looked at me and she said, this is anxiety. This woman had high anxiety because the things that you would hear is that she would have these they called it temper. She had a bad temper. But what is a temper? She would have these blow-ups, but then they would pass over, and she'd be very contrite about it because she would get anxious, and that's something that could have been treated today.
Right.
You know, I mean, half the world is on Prozac.
And there is a therapeutic line of conversation that tries to tell someone who might say, I'm overreacting. A therapist would say, no, you're reacting.
Right.
Take the over out of it.
Right.
Your reaction is genuine.
Right.
Let's hold that, examine it, and try
figure
to pull
out
it
why
apart.
and why. Right. And if she had that, I mean, she definitely had.
But the society around her said overreacting.
Right. And she had issues. She might have been bipolar. He was a depressive. She had mania. And even people.
What a great combo.
Isn't that great? Even men who did not like her, contemporaneous friends of his, some who hated her, said that if it weren't for her, he might not have been president because she was a driver. Once he was president, he had moral authority, but she was the driver, and he would go into these you know, his career was pretty volatile.
Yes.
You know, I mean, he was elected to one House seat before he became president. And she was a little engine, and he kept thinking, well, I can't do this, I can't do this. But in the meantime, he was progressing. He was a natural orator. But he doubted himself quite a bit, and she had no doubt. She said, you were going to be president.
Even generalists about Abraham Lincoln know the name Stephen Douglas.
Yes.
What I learned from your book is that Stephen Douglas and Mary Todd Lincoln.
He courted her.
They could have been a thing.
They could have been a thing. And in fact, her family wanted it to be a thing because he was from a proper family. He might have gone to Exeter in Vermont. And and they said, well, what about Stephen Douglas?
He was more of a catch.
Yes. And she said, well, he's a Yankee. You know, I don't want a Yankee. She was all in for the Whigs and Henry Clay. And that was part of her draw to Lincoln. He was a Whig, and she loved Henry Clay, and he was also an acolyte of Henry Clay. And she had no interest in Stephen Douglas. It was, and there was some talk from her sister that maybe she used Douglas to make him jealous, to make Lincoln jealous, because Lincoln was sort of obtuse about stuff like that. But
some men are.
Some men are.
Read.
Right. But she was not interested. I mean, she was totally on Lincoln the whole time.
You can listen to my full conversation with Lois Romano about her book, which just made it on the New York Times bestseller list, on your favorite podcast platform. Happy Thursday, everyone. This is The Takeout. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report is next.